All right, so M1 iMac. I gave it a glowing review when it first was announced. I love the design style. White bezels are my absolute favorite. But I have lightened up to it a little bit. I'll admit it looks good in some scenarios. It is not for me, but you're really amped to talk about it, so I'll let you take this one.
You know, that is the key word here. It is not for us.
No,
I think that is such an underrated thing when we talk about products. Is like these are not hyper targeted, but a lot of these generalist seeming products are really for a certain demographic that does not include us.
It's funny because the demographic is probably more general, but it's hyper focused on the general demographic.
Right.
Does that
it's
make
like
sense?
when you watch like a children's video on YouTube, you're like, how does anyone watch this? It's not funny, it's not entertaining. But for the very large audience that it's for, it's great. Even for music, I feel like that's another. Anyway, so for this computer, the M1 iMac, it is, as Apple would probably describe it, a very basic, general, really capable and versatile all-in-one desktop computer.
Yeah.
Part of it, which is the part we're talking about the most, is the design, because basically when it comes down to it, it's the M1 again, just in a new dress, just in a new package. So we've talked about the M1 MacBook Pro, the M1 MacBook Air is the same chip, M1 Mac Mini is the same chip, and we'll talk about the M1 iPad in a minute. But ultimately, it's this same computer with a 24-inch 4.5K display and whatever design they wanted to make. So the design they chose was an 11.5 millimeter thin sliver of a metal desktop with a nice big chin, white bezels, and a not height adjustable stand. But the whole thing is like 10 pounds. So it's actually like...
It's great. I moved it. First of all, moving the old iMacs, despite how small they were, sucked because of how it like went down into a point. It was actually sharp to like move those around, and they weighed a good amount. I mean, it's a lot of computer in there for how small it is, but I just moved this one out of because we had to return our review unit. It's pretty crazy. It like really feels like you're just carrying a really big laptop with a weird stand coming out.
It's funny. I actually think I didn't say this in the video, but I should have. I think the pads at the bottom aren't sticky enough, because I feel like I bump the computer and it just slides over, and it's just too easy to slide. That thing it's very light. Our two most controversial observations about this iMac were the chin and the white bezel.
Yeah.
The white bezel, I feel like I at least understand.
Yes.
I fully get what they're going for, which is, okay, this is going to be a nice, friendly looking computer. It has a nice pastel look on the front, which is different from the dark color on the back. But if you're putting this in a room like a living room or a dining room or a kitchen or a bedroom or a random home office or something like that, 8 times out of 10, it's a white wall behind it. And it turns out that's typically the best way to look like not an industrial box, but like a nice, friendly, usable computer.
Yeah, a piece of the house rather than a piece of tech. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's the same reason why the new Nest has white bezels. It's the same reason why the new Nest Home Hub with the screen with the Google Assistant has white bezels. It's just because it's just a little more friendly looking. I think that'll probably be the case for a while. I would still, again, I'm not in the target demographic for this, so I would still prefer a dark bezel, but I am not getting this iMac for my house, so it doesn't matter what I think. It's not for me. The chin, on the other hand. Have you seen the iFixit teardown of this?
I have it open right now.
Okay.
It's really funny.
It's great. So the chin. So the iMac is sort of a legend for that chin. It's had that design of a screen at the top and a bit of a chin at the bottom since the original iMac, honestly, where it had the speakers underneath. Every single one has had some sort of a chin, including this new one. And if you look at the iFixit teardown, most of the computer is in that chin, and then most of behind the display is kind of empty actually, which leads me to believe, well, they intentionally kept the chin. They wanted the chin there. They could have definitely made it thicker and not had a chin, and they made a choice to make it super thin and keep the chin.
I'm trying to find a way to argue with that, but it's really hard because like literally
The
this
argument is
teardown is like it just looks like a bunch of RAM sticks glued onto the back of the screen.
It's
pretty
extremely
wild.
well integrated. Yeah, the whole thing is at the bottom. It's like the M1 is there. There's no upgradable. You're not popping RAM in and out or anything. Like the speakers are all down there. Almost everything's in the bottom. The question is, should they have? And in my video, I suggest like people buying this who already have a thicker computer would have been totally fine with a 20 millimeter thick computer with no chin, and that would have looked way better and way less like a piece of tech than this new like extra chin on the bottom of the white bezel that now sticks out a little bit. You still have the pastel color of the stand it sits on. And that's a nice friendly color, and that's cool and everything.
Yeah.
But I
wonder if that is it, if it's that pop of color like to add in there to be a little more friendly, because you could almost argue looking at the teardown, like if you look at the wiring that's going up to the webcam and a couple other components, you could argue that it being in the chin means more wires or longer wires to get to the places the different things they're trying to get to. So it doesn't make much sense. I would prefer no chin as well, but yeah, my guess is looking for that colorful, friendly. I'm almost calling it like a piece of furniture or decoration at this point that's functional. Yeah. But you're right. There is still the stand.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's wild though to see how little is in this. Like this looks like this looks like a like Chromebook or something.
It's literally just about the same computer as the M1 Mac Mini, which obviously is much smaller and has more ports actually. But they just take those insides and put it in a much larger display, and then it's attached to it, and it's a really nice display. And if you watch the review, by the way, I want to give it as much credit as I can. Like the amount of display and computer you get for the money in that iMac is great.
It's the most underrated thing about when people complain about how expensive iMacs are is how good of a screen you're getting, and no one ever takes that into consideration when comparing it to building a PC.
Yeah, so it's a really important like well integrated thing. It's also so thin that the headphone jack couldn't be on the back, so they put it on the side. But it's got 2 or 4 ports on the back, depending on which version you get. If you get the base model, 2 ports.
No Ethernet.
No Ethernet, just 2 Thunderbolt ports. If you upgrade to the $14.99 one, I believe that's when you're getting 2 more. So you get 4 ports on the back and Ethernet on the power brick.
I still think Ethernet on the power brick is genius and just a really, really good idea.
It's a good idea. I think it's easy to get mad at it, but I think it's a good idea because no one ever unplugs Ethernet once you plug it in.
Why would you get mad at it? I just don't.
I think people think it's an excuse of like, oh, Apple didn't add it to the back where everything else could have gone. I've seen weird arguments for it. I don't believe those arguments. I think it's a good idea.
Apple's helping me with my cable management. Oh, those jerks.
Yeah. So
I don't know. Unless there's a data transfer restriction that is bottlenecking because of the power cord. It's not, right?
Yeah, full on gigabit. So good on that. It's just funny that this is the first Apple desktop in many, many years with external power brick because they've all had power built in. It's just too thin.
I don't mind that the more I think about it though.
Yeah, it's fine. Just sits on the ground.
As long as you can find a good place to put it. If you're one of those psychos that has a desk in the middle of your room that's not up against a wall, maybe it looks a little weird. But other than that, totally fine.
It works for me. But if I were to get one for my own home, I probably would go with blue or silver. Probably blue or silver. Also, shout out to Superstaff who did a really great Photoshop job of a matte black version.
Looks really good.
It was a great Photoshop job. We were all staring at it in the studio, like, did
debating
he get
if it
the
was
D-brand skin or did he just make this look really good? He did Photoshop that.
Did you confirm with him?
Yeah. Well, he did a breakdown on his Instagram.
Oh, he did a breakdown? All right. I think the way we found out is the little tiny reflection on the table you could tell was silver.
Yeah. My question is now, okay, we've got all the M1 stuff out the way. Great. M1 Max, M1 baseline stuff, M1 iPad, M1 iMac. Is the upgraded Pro version of an Apple Silicon iMac Pro going to get rid of the chin? And will it have black bezels? I don't think so.
Yes. No and yes is my answer to
no to the chin, yes to the black bezels.
Still has chin, yes has black bezels.
Interesting. I think so much of the Pro stuff in Apple's lineup is boxy and square when you look at Pro Display XDR, when you look at iPad Pro. I think if Apple is considering matching that Pro aesthetic with the new iMac Pro, they should get rid of the chin on the iMac Pro and make a Pro Display XDR shaped box. But I guess I could see them keeping the chin.
I guess I would just argue is like the chin doesn't make it any less boxy. It's still extremely boxy, and the aspect ratio is different, obviously. Like, well, the screen aspect ratio is the same. The footprint aspect ratio is different, but it's still boxy. I just think space gray seems to be I think it was David saying how like it seems to be their lower range things generally are more colorful. If you look at like iPhone XR and even some other iMacs and stuff like that, and then space gray is the Pro version. Yeah. So I could definitely see space gray, black bezels, Pro, industrial, like professional looking. That's what
Apple, if you're
that'd
listening.
That'd be my guess.
If you're listening, the pros don't care about how thin it is. I promise. None of us care about
that's a good point. The thinness as well. But I bet they keep the chin just because it's the continuity between the two. So when they're putting them in like a store, somebody's not looking like, oh, this is so vastly different. I'm probably losing so much power versus Pro and
that's
the bottom
interesting.
or something like that. Yeah.
Is the iMac Pro sitting in stores next to the iMac?
I don't know.
As an upsell?
I'm just kind of guessing. I would kind of assume so.
I wonder. I don't think a lot of people are buying iMac Pros that don't need them. It's discontinued already, which leads me to believe most people weren't buying it. But I feel like if you can make a good visual argument for why this iMac is different, other than just being black, then it gives people a reason to feel like they're getting more. And so
True. Yeah, my argument goes the opposite way against it as well. You're right.
Yeah. I think obviously I would want them to do it a certain way. I'm just curious what Apple's deciding motive will be. Do they want the continuity or do they want the upsell look?
If the Pro was an Pro Display XDR that just happened to have the computer in the back of that would be sick.
That would be amazing. That would
be awesome.
That would be. I would really like that. But we'll have to see. But there's a lot of great rumors about just like way more power, way more GPU cores, way more big high power cores, and like obviously that we'll have to see it when it happens. Maybe it's M2, maybe it's M1X. We'll see
M1X
that when it
seems
happens.
to be the favorite so far.
But I'm very interested in that. But we also got M1 iPad Pro. This to me is a incredible spec bump, but it's still an iPad. And I feel like every review said this basically, which is like...
I'm going to be honest, you were like really excited to talk about this. And I was like, I really thought we just decided it was...
No, I mean, so I did the review and you should watch the review. It's 15 minutes long. It's like everything you need to know about this. I would love to know what we're going to get at WWDC that's going to change the iPad. That's really what I am curious about now. We're going to see in like a month. But M1 iPad Pro is
We're going to see in like 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's like
by
first
the time
week of
this
June.
Comes out. Yeah.
M1 iPad Pro though, currently it's iPad OS 14, so we've had the same software for a bit, but it is just immensely powerful and super impressive for what that chip did. I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I didn't think it would be this much better than A15 Bionic or whatever it was already, A12Z, and it's way better. It benchmarks higher than the 16-inch MacBook Pro, and you know, at a certain point, it's like, what are you going to do with all that extra power? You're still using iPad OS. You're still limited by the ports and the file management situation and the multi-window ability, kinda. And I can't wait for a little bit extra power. One comment I've seen a lot is, why do you guys keep asking for like Mac OS on the iPad? Like, just get a Mac.
Mm-hmm.
It's not what I want. I don't want Mac OS on the iPad. I just want better iPad OS. It's a difference. I like the icons. I like the widgets. Let us put widgets all over the screen. Give us free multi-window with touch support. I'm not asking for that on the Mac. I don't want a Mac that does that. I'm personally not in that camp. And then just the ability to do a little bit more multitasking. And obviously the pencil is incredible already. And that chip dominates iPad OS. It's great. So that's all I'm saying is the M1 iPad Pro with that chip and the performance you get out of it is way more powerful than anything you are able to take advantage of. There's no apps yet out there that are, every visually intensive game that I tried was already fine and is still fine on the new one. Honestly, the biggest difference you'll notice is the new XDR display, which is only on the larger 12.9-inch iPad Pro. I am personally a smaller 11-inch iPad Pro user, and so I will continue to use my 2018 11-inch iPad Pro.
I think a lot of people have that, yeah.
Because it's just as good. It's still 120 hertz display, and it's not getting the XDR update, which looks phenomenal with HDR content, but it's not on the small one, so don't need it yet.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So you're just saying this new iPad basically is just like way, way too powerful for what it is. That you can't like fully grasp or benefit from it.
Yeah, it's like that. If you were in charge of, like, there's maybe 3 different things you can improve about the iPad. You can way improve the specs, you can way improve the software, or you can way improve like the design. They've improved the specs and performance so much that it's ahead of the other pieces of the iPad.
Yeah.
And you don't really get to enjoy all the benefits of the M1 because nothing gets there yet. So if you get a new iPad from last year, you're going to get the same experience.
You're saying it's so powerful and something almost like if you had a pickup truck that could go 0 to 60 in like 4.5 seconds. Something like that.
It'd be like if you had a car that could go 0 to 60, but you needed a pickup truck.
I was trying to segue.
You were segueing in F-150.
Come on,
I like the... Finish the segue. I like the segue. Go for it. Finish that one, because that was...
I don't want to anymore.
Are there any pickup trucks that do 0 to 60 in 4.5? Or are you just hypothetically making one up?
I'm so sad right now. Are we leaving this part in? Or